Welcome, welcome, welcome. Fantasy Bros Before Pro Podcast, August 25th. Jay here with a guest, Andrew Hall, FF on Twitter. Andrew, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem, man. For the people that don't know, we follow each other on Twitter, and that's how we linked up. But let the people know out there, where they could find your work, what you've done as far as the industry and everything, so they get to know you a little bit better.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I currently write for Pro Football Network, profootballnetwork.com. I'm part of their dynasty crew. There's about 7 or 8 of us really that kind of push out a lot of content. We're really ramping up right now with redraft season, kind of switching from dynasty to redraft focus and trying to put out some pieces to show who are good values this year as opposed to dynasty, and just trying to help our readers and our followers just be better and win a title. That's the whole point, right? Win that ship. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing now. I'm coming out with 2 articles a week at this point, trying to grind out as much as we can as we approach the season, which Lord willing happens on time. So yeah,
Right.
We're ready to go.
Right. I mean, all things considered, right now it's like 16 days before Thursday night football, and 19 days before if you're not a Texans or a Chiefs fan, 19 days when your team kicks off, or 20
Yeah,
days.
I am sadly a Cincinnati Bengals fan, or
Well,
proudly I should say, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I'm a Bengals fan, so that Sunday is going to be good for me.
Well, I'm actually really, really big on a lot of the pieces there, and we're gonna get into that a little bit. Like I have plenty of shares of like in a lot of the dynasty startups that I was in, I found myself staring AJ Green down the barrel like in the 9th, 10th round, and I'm like, why am I gonna let this pass? Even if I already got my younger guys earlier, why don't I get me somebody that can help me this year? So I have a lot of AJ. I love Joe Mixon. Tyler Boyd's a great player. T. Higgins, I think the world does. The same thing with Joe Burrow. There's a lot there to like right now, honestly, and you guys are doing things at least in the right way.
Yeah, we're very excited. I mean, we've got an owner in Mike Brown who for a long time just didn't like to make changes. So we're real happy to see the changes that are coming this year. Obviously, it's a weird time and a weird off season, and there's a whole bunch of uncertainty. But I still think a lot of us Bengals fans are just real excited to be here and ready for the season to start and kind of see what we got in front of us. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
For sure, for sure. So I'll ask you, just like I ask all of my guests that come on here. We're content creators, right? I have people come on and I ask them, well, the question is, what do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy playing in leagues or creating content to help people win their leagues?
Well, I think it kind of depends on how well my team is doing,
Okay.
right? I mean, if I'm doing really well, I'm loving the season. There's nothing better than that. But I mean, there is something I like creating content throughout the other, 40 whatever weeks of the year. You know what I mean? Like there are 16 weeks of a regular season. You get, 13 weeks of a fantasy regular season and 3 weeks of playoffs. And then the rest of the year is just creating content. I love that. Nice. So, I mean, if you're looking at the greater scheme, it's definitely the putting out content, talking about fantasy, talking about values, trade talks, all that kind of stuff. I love that because it's all year round. So yeah, that's probably where I land.
That's awesome. Now, here's the second question to kind of follow up to that. How many leagues is too many leagues for you, Andrew?
Ooh, well, okay. So if you asked me that 5 years ago, I would have said 4 leagues was too many.
Really?
But now the answer is probably 20.
Right.
Because I've taken on a bunch more and tried to just expand my experience a little more and try to get into it. I get invited to leagues all the time, and I hate having to say no. But it's just like I only have so many hours in a week to put in waiver claims and to deal with lineups and injuries, and I'm putting out content and things too. So it's I got to be a little careful. But right now, I think I'm in 15 leagues. And it's stretching me, so I feel like 20 is probably my number of too many. But again, ask me in a year, that might be different.
Right. Not a bad start. See, me, I'm closer into 30 leagues, but they're all dynasty, and a lot of them are deeper leagues. So it's like there's not really too much on the waiver wire. So like that's when people are like, "How are you in 30 leagues?" Well, it's not redraft, and I don't have to do waivers. Like really, they're like waivers. Nothing happens in dynasty leagues. Like it's either you're trading or you're just sticking with your team. So I just got super addicted in this off season, especially with the quarantine, to dynasty startups and any sort of super flex league. Like I'm just like all in head first on all these things. So if you have a super flex dynasty startup, that's like through the roof. I'm ready to go when it comes to that.
No, I hear you. I definitely started a few this off season, and I am definitely making the switch more to dynasty as well for that same logic. I was in I think 4 or 5 at a time redraft, and that was when I was lots of waiver moves and all that. And I noticed that I've been in dynasty for 3 years now, and I noticed that too, that the weekly waivers are fun but not as stressful, right? If you miss out on that Gus Edwards pick, okay, you know what I mean? Like it's not the end of the world. Right. So it wasn't quite as much of a drain, but it is still lineup setting. There is still injuries, and there is still all that on Sunday morning or Thursday night watching the game and you end
Right.
up having every share of every player, you're like, wow, okay, great. And then it kind of stops mattering a little bit,
Right. It
which I
does.
like. Because in that point, then I can just talk about values, I can just talk about players, and then I can root for my own team, the Bengals, and be happy overall. So that's kind of the goal too.
Right. And then I think that the reason that I'm in so many leagues is because one of them has to win a championship, right?
That's right. That's right. The more you're in, the more title chances you have. That's exactly right.
All right, cool, Andrew. I always like to ask guests, because as content creators, it's just like, how much is too much and how much is it taking you off of what you really want to do when you're delivering content. So it's a good discussion to have, I think.
For sure.
Um,
For sure.
all right, you want to get into some camp talk, because that's all we have. NFL franchises are not allowing people to hold up videos for longer than 24 hours. We're getting all of our camp updates from beat reporters and Instagram videos at this point. This is the strangest camp ever. For the first time ever, camp, coach speak is pretty much all we have to go on at this point. So
Yeah.
let's start. Have you been watching Hard Knocks?
No, I don't really watch it until it's all done. And in the past, I've watched like maybe the first episode, and then I usually wait till it's all over. And then I just like to binge it. The Netflix in me, I just like to watch it all at once.
For sure.
Maybe it's the impatient side. I just can't wait a week.
Right.
But for the most part, too, I mean, this year I think would be even more interesting probably to watch it live. I keep waffling on that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I love that kind of stuff. But that coach speak, it gets kind of, I don't know, it's too much noise, right?
Right.
There's not enough actual signal in there. It's just, yeah, it's just a lot of blur.
And then the other thing is you have to know your coaches, right? Like when Pete Carroll says that somebody's the best player of all time, that's what he says about all his players. Like that's not,
Right.
like he has the best equipment manager, he has the best, water guy, like he has the best
Chewing gum. Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
For sure. So, take some of it with a grain of salt, but things that make sense, it might be, you might have to put two and two together a little bit. So, the reason I brought up Hard Knocks is because we're going to start with the two LA teams, and I'm going to start with the Chargers actually. So, today, per Anthony Lynn, he says that Mike Williams will be out for quote unquote a while. There is some optimism that he might be around for week one, but I'm not sure that we should count on it. Plus, I'm not certain your feelings on the offensive weapons in LA for the Chargers and how they're performing and things like that. But, this is good information to know before you go into your draft, because it should depress Mike Williams' EDP a little bit more to where you might be able to get him for a steal. Now, that all depends on how you feel about the offense and Tyrod Taylor. So I was hoping to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think Tyrod Taylor, however you want to pronounce that, I think he's definitely going to be the starter week one. There's no reason for them to put in Herbert. And the way I see it, it depends a little bit. I guess no matter what, if they win a lot, why would they get rid of Tyrod? And if they lose a lot, why would they put Herbert in a position to fail? I just don't see Herbert starting this season unless an injury happens, which we can't predict.
No.
So with that, I look at the offense taking a step down, right? I think Eckler goes from an RB1 to an RB2. Mm-hmm. Allen goes from an wide receiver 2 to a wide receiver 3. Williams goes from a 3 to a flex. I mean, everybody kind of takes a hit a little bit. I do think Hunter Henry, if he can stay healthy, I think he's still a viable tight end one option, but only because Tyrod loves throwing those short passes. He tends to, evacuate the pocket and look for those quick outs and things like that. So I think in general that offense is going to see a downturn, but I don't really know what it's going to look like either. So part of me says, I think it'll get worse, but the other part says maybe it's just too risky and I'm kind of pushing avoid on a lot of those anyway.
For sure. And I think we're on the same page when it comes to them, is that we understand that the offense is going to be completely run-centric. So the touches that Eckler is going to get aren't going to be as valuable as those targets that Phillip Rivers loves to dump off.
Yep.
So Eckler, I have him closer to an RB1. I think that as long as he secures the goal line work, then he should return some good value for you as an RB1. But I can completely see the argument about RB2 and everything. And I'm glad that you brought up Hunter Henry, because I don't understand why people are so skittish. Like, Tyrod has a track record of throwing to tight ends. When he was in Buffalo, Charles Clay was probably the wide receiver one if it wasn't LaShawn McCoy. So I don't know why people are off of him. I see him falling all the time, and I'm either ending up with him or Evan Ingram because people are just scared off for some reason, and I'm willing to take that value as long as they drop.
Yeah, and I'm actually in a redraft now with a bunch of the PFN crew, and I got him at 808, Hunter Henry for my tight end one, and I'm ecstatic with that. I mean, that's crazy value. I was playing the late tight end game. I went Patrick Mahomes in the third, so I went a little early on my QB. It's only one QB, but still, Pat Mahomes, I'm not going to miss that. Mm-hmm. And so I was real happy to get Hunter Henry. I think a lot of people are fading him because of the injury, because of the uncertainty, and all of these question marks. but there's no one else really at the tight end position there that comes to mind even that
Right.
really threatens his role. And I think the more that we see Tyrod play, I think you're going to start to see the tight end become a bigger position in that offense. And I just think overall that's terrific value in the 8th in a redraft. So yeah, why not?
For sure, for sure. And I like the point of, Antonio Gates is not there,
Yep, he's gone.
okay. So, yeah. So, I mean, and then the injury concern is a valid concern for sure because it's almost every year that Hunter Henry's been hurt. We know that the kid is a baller, but unfortunately, the best ability is availability. And that's, but still, 8th round, I'm all in on Hunter Henry. And if Evan Ingram slips to me like in the 6th, 7th, I'm with it.
Yeah, in this draft, Ingram went 8-5. So I was really looking for
Wow.
Ingram. I know. I was
Wow.
really looking for Ingram. So I was the same with you. I'm like, I'll take either one of those. So I was happy with taking the second. They're the same to me. They're both terrific values at that range.
Right. Everybody's running from them. And I think that they're gonna wind up being values. Everybody's gonna look back at the end of their draft. I love doing that, looking back at the draft like, oh my God, I passed on this guy, I passed on this guy. I think that's what's gonna happen with Ingram and Henry, I believe.
Well, there's also just a wide range of tight end 2s. Right. There's that top tier of 3 tight ends. And then there's kind of, you could even say 10 or 12 guys that could be in the top 5 after that.
Right.
And so it really throws this wrench in the mix where you have players now looking at it and saying, well, there are 18 tight ends I'm okay starting. Why take one early?
Right.
And so everybody waits. And so their value drops on all of them. And then you get runs on other positions. And so your draft is, I think everyone in the industry, everybody that writes, everybody that creates any sort of content, we almost always say play your draft,
That's
flexible. You
Be
can't go in with a
adaptive.
plan. You can't look at it and say, I'm going to take Hunter Henry in the 6th no matter what, because that's not smart.
Nope.
But I think at the same time, you have to be able to see how your draft is going, kind of see how players are going, and then say, well, I'm willing to wait. I've got a tier. I've got these 2 guys that are still there. I'll wait till the next round. And if that happens 3 rounds in a row, you're just getting stellar value.
For sure. And I think that's, I'm lockstep with you on that one too. My favorite draft strategy is best player available and just be water, like, with
Yep.
your draft. If it's a 1 quarterback league, but you're playing with guys that are, just a home league, right? Like not experts or anything like that, but you're seeing quarterbacks fly off the board. You better get on it. Otherwise, you're going to wind up starting like Derek Carr week after week. And that's in a 1 quarterback league. That's not really what you're looking for.
That's painful. Yeah, I'm with you exactly.
Right. So more out of the Chargers camp. So Joe Reed, Keenan Allen didn't practice today. We got the Mike Williams situation. So it seems like there was a lot of buzz about him, but apparently today he was moving around with the running backs, which is a little weird, like for me, especially since we've gotten the news that Joshua Kelly is kind of distancing himself from Justin Jackson, for that second role right behind Eckler. Like, it's not going to be a role of first 2 downs and then Eckler. Like, it'll be Eckler, but if anybody's going to mix in, it looks like Joshua Kelly's on his way. Joshua Kelly, for me, is one of my favorite late-round targets in any redraft. Like, just taking a shot on a guy that, barring injury, anything like that, they could, be your guy. And if you find out after week 1 that they're not going to be in any sort of role, then cut him.
No, I'm again right there with you. I think Joshua Kelly is the guy that you want outside of Eckler. And I also see them moving Eckler around a lot. I would not be shocked at all to see Eckler out of the slot and then on first down, and then they bring in Joshua Kelly as a first down running back for a fake. Well, the more he plays, the more he gets acclimated to that offense, the better he is at pass protection, things like that. He's going to earn a spot on that team. And I think behind the top 2 receivers, I think Eckler is a great third receiver option with Hunter Henry. So that's your 4 guys to catch. You're still going to need a guy behind the line of scrimmage to be a run option. And I'm right there with you. I think Kelly's a terrific value because, like you said, if he doesn't show up in week 1, week 2, cut him and move on. Pick up the flavor of the week. You're not losing anything. I'm right there.
For sure, especially in them later rounds. In the later rounds, you do not go floor, guys. Like, this is the later rounds is where you shoot for the stars and hope that something happens.
Exactly.
So with the other Los Angeles franchise, we just had some news come through right now too, actually. So Cam Akers has been impressing while Darrell Henderson Jr. is dealing with an injury. I haven't really heard too much about Malcolm Brown outside of the first Hard Knocks episode when he was the one that was running with the ones. But there was just a report that just came through right now while we were talking. The Athletics' Jordan Rodriguez, I think his name is, believes that Cam Akers will separate from Darrell Henderson in the second half of the season. I think we all think that. For sure.
Yeah. That's what rookie draft players dynasty players in rookie drafts have been kind of expecting. That's why they were seeing him go as 5th overall in a 1 QB rookie league. So I don't think that's a shock at all. I think the piece of that's interesting is kind of what you hit on, is that Malcolm Brown isn't really getting any love right now. It's coach speak, but he's not getting any of it. That's the thing you should listen for. sometimes what they're not saying is just as important as what they are saying. And the fact that Malcolm Brown isn't getting talked about, and Henderson, even though he's hurt, isn't really doing much, of course, you're going to see Cam Akers rise to the top by default. So that's not news. But the Malcolm Brown, I think that could be, in my mind anyway, that could be a fade or someone that you pick up later as another one of those guys like we were talking about with Joshua Kelly, who could end up being something who's not getting talked about. And I think you're going to start to see his ADP drop a little. You're going to start to see his dynasty value take a hit. And I think you could start to grab him for, off the waivers in some leagues and shallower ones. And he could still be a producer for you, because I still think he's got a good chance to earn some time in that backfield.
For sure. And I think that people are scared off because they hear the coach speak of, 3 ways and things like that. Like we know who the guy is really, like talent wise, right? We saw Darrell Henderson last year. There was a fair amount of hype around him. But when you watch him on the field, he just didn't seem like he understood where the gaps are when he was running. Like he just wasn't ready to go. Like it
wasn't impressive.
Right, at all. So that's the thing with Cam Akers, right? Like Cam Akers comes in, they spend a high enough pick where you're like, wow, this is significant draft capital. And then, the kid's a baller too. Like I think that's the other part that people like. He was really good. Like this isn't a guy that's going to fall into work because he was drafted and the other 2 guys aren't performing. No, Cam Akers can play football. And I think that like I said, we're going to find that out sooner than later, honestly. So, Cam Akers has been going in 5th, 6th round, 7th round, some places. I don't know that I would feel as comfortable with that, only because you're just banking on him to immediately take the job. And I think I would like a little bit more security in those early rounds. Like that's why I'm not really taking Jonathan Taylor, in the spot that he's going. Sometimes I see him in the 4th or the 5th, and that's just too high for somebody that I'm not certain already will have the role. Like Marlon Mack is still there. It's the same thing. So,
just to interject for a second, I'm with you on a lot of that. I usually fade rookies in redraft, except for running backs on teams that are running teams that have aging quarterbacks like Phillip Rivers and a terrific offensive line. So I'm looking at it that Jonathan Taylor, I think, in my opinion, I took him in the 4th in that same league. Okay. And I've taken him in the 4th in a couple of leagues, actually, just because I think that he's going to be a stud down the stretch. He might have a little bit of a slow start, but I think he takes over by weeks 2 or 3, whereas Akers takes over in 6 or 7. And those 3 weeks are a big difference in value. So, yeah, I'm with you, though. I don't think I'd take Akers until probably 6th or 7th round, to be honest, kind of using that same logic and saying I'm okay getting him a little later. But I'm with you, though. I don't usually like going too risky until round 5 or so. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of all in on upside. Let's just get anybody we can think of that might, show up and be a big producer.
Right, and that's a fair point about Jonathan Taylor for sure. And Jonathan Taylor is a league winner. Like I want you guys to understand, like he's that good. And that line is going to put him in a position where he's not going to see a defender until 3 yards. And then after that, it's already too late. He's built up a head of steam. He can probably run through some people. So I'm with you on that one too, actually. You may have just changed my mind. And, and I hope none of my league mates in my home league are watching,
Yeah, it depends, of course, on your league, right? That's what we always say. If you see a lot of running backs going early and you miss a run, I think Taylor is one of those guys that may fall to you after the run because he's not getting a lot of name. And obviously in home leagues, it depends on your league how active they are. Some guys just, don't have a clue who is who. And I don't know this Jonathan Taylor guy, so I'm going to take Mark Ingram instead. I'd much rather have Taylor over Ingram. Yeah. But there are some guys out there that would have that opposite. And so, and that's, again, where it comes in funny in redraft and home leagues, especially. Just play your board, get your guy. But that's why I think in my mind, he's a great 4th round pick. I don't think I'd go any earlier than 4th for Taylor because I'm with you. I think Mac does get the ball some. I don't think he's washed up like everybody says. So I don't think Taylor is a slam dunk. But for an RB2 or flex, I think he's a great option.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I really believe that Jonathan Taylor could be a league winner. It just all depends on how long you're willing to wait, right? Like, and there'll be people that draft him maybe, high like that. But after a week or two, if he's not producing, he may just get cut, especially in these home leagues. The same thing. Like, guys are just going to be like, oh, he stinks after 2 games. If Marlon Mack comes out and he starts tearing it up. Because Marlon Mack is a very good runner. Like, that's the thing about it. It's like, I'm not disparaging Marlon Mack when I say that Jonathan Taylor is really good because Marlon Mack has some incredible footwork. The only problem is he doesn't offer you much in the pass game. But any competent running back behind that line is going to have success, I believe. I mean, we even saw last year. We saw last year, right? Jonathan Williams found himself fantasy relevant towards the end of the year because Quentin Nelson in that line. It's incredible, man. Like and now they have the threat of a little bit more of a deep passing game. Whether that passing is better or not is up to you, but the ball will go down the field a lot more with Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, and it's going to open up the box. You're not going to be able to load it like they did last year. I'm right there with you. I think Jonathan Taylor is like you said, he's a league winner, and I think if you can get him at the right value, I think that's a slam dunk pick. Again, depending on how you like to build your roster.
For sure. For sure. All right, let's move on. Beat reporters out of Cleveland are saying that the Browns offense is trying to find itself. Does this make you panic on Browns players, or is this just, whatever? Training camp is training camp, because there's so many things that happen in training camp that wind up not happening in the regular season. Guys either perform really well and they don't on the field, or the opposite. They don't perform well in practice and they're gamers. This for me is just a little troublesome because there is a brand new offense being put in with Stefanski being there. So that gives me a little bit of pause. But I said on a few shows before this, the teams that don't have continuity are the teams that are likely going to struggle out of the gate. And I think that this is it, right? And Baker, let's just face it, last year regressed. He was moving to his right in the pocket when he would have clean pockets and just, you didn't see the quick decisiveness that he had in his first few games. When everything's on you and everybody's all over you, they can pick apart your flaws. And I don't think he reacted well to that. So, as far as the Cleveland fantasy relevant people, Chubb is fine. Hunt is a PPR stud. Does this scare you off of Odell Beckham or Jarvis Landry or even Austin Hooper?
Well, I think you're hitting on all of it really there. I think that the change of the offense causes a lot of anxiety in fantasy. We all want the same thing. We all want to be able to predict with 100% accuracy based on last year, here's where they'll finish. And then changes like this where it's a whole offense changing, but really the players don't. The only real change on the offense on the field is Austin Hooper being added to the mix.
And who's the guy that they just, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They brought in a lineman from Tennessee.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely some line changes too. I don't remember his name now, but I'm looking at more for like the skill players. But I look at that Austin Hooper ad and I just wrote an article actually for PFN about Austin Hooper. I think he's going to be a terrific addition to that offense because David Njoku obviously had hand and wrist injuries, if I recall. He was kind of in and out of the lineup. He didn't really play much at all last year. And I think that's one of the things that Stefanski likes to bring is a solid tight end performance. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to see a lot more 2 tight end sets with Landry and Beckham on the outside and with one running back and things like that. So I think you're going to see some different variations that I think is going to help Baker Mayfield have more short options. I think that's going to give him more quick reads, more quick outs. I think you're going to see a lot more short dump offs, 7, 8, 9 yard passes. And those add up, right? So I'm not necessarily too worried per se. I do think there is some concern, and I think that's a valid option, and it's okay for us to lower their potential value and see them drop in drafts. But for myself, I don't look at that as a riskier play than last year. And last year was pretty risky too. So I don't look at it like they were any worse than last year. I just look at them like, well, okay, they do have some added risk, but you're getting Beckham in the 4th now and Landry in the 10th in some leagues.
I never thought I could see that. I never thought I would see that about Odell Beckham. And that's the thing. It's
same.
Like, when you draft Odell Beckham, you're drafting him hoping that he can rekindle what he had with Eli Manning. I think that you're spot on too, because we have a track record of Stefanski using 2 tight ends as he did in Minnesota. The only thing that scares me about this is that I know for a fact the passing attempts are going to go down. This is Kevin Stefanski we're talking about. He's going to feed Nick Chubb the ball until he throws up. So the targets are going down. This is what scares me about Hooper. The targets are dropping, right? It's clear that they want Kareem Hunt to be involved, and he seems to be the pass catching back because they don't use Chubb in that way. Then you're talking about Landry and Odell, and it feels like, for me, Austin Hooper is going to be 4th on the pecking order. So while I believe that he has a chance to finish top 12, I have him lower, like a lot lower. Like what he had going for him in Atlanta was target share, like a lot, and he, he has injuries to Julio and things like that during the season where he was needed. Now, unless these injuries pop up, his target share is going to dwindle into the 7, 8, maybe 10%, maybe the most for him. And how many?
I mean, it's very possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very possible. And I'm not necessarily even going to argue that. You're exactly right. There is only so many balls to go around. And we saw last year, even with that Minnesota offense, it got sparse quick. There are definitely, I think we're going to see games out of Baker where he throws 12 passes, right? And then that's going to hurt because all of those players will suffer for that, including Hunt really out of the backfield. On the other end of that, though, I do think Hooper is a real talent. He was in that offense for 2 years with Atlanta and actually, was tight end 6 2 years in a row.
Okay.
So I think he's definitely got the ability if there's the volume. And that's the if that we're all asking, right? I think what you're going to see, though, with Hooper is he's going really late in ADP. There's a lot of people that are letting him fall into like that same 10th, 12th, 11th round or whatever kind of range. And I think what you're going to see is people that get him will know by week 1 or 2 how he's being used, like you were saying before, and be willing to move on. Because tight end is one of those positions, too, that there are almost always breakouts. Like Darren Waller came out of nowhere, right? Gronkowski could maybe, be the guy, but then after week 2, it's O.J. Howard again, a name from the past, right? So there's a whole bunch of guys out there that could be Dan Arnold, right, in Arizona. We're hearing a lot of talk about him, too. So I think it's – yep, exactly. And there's a whole bunch of those guys that are just no-name guys that are not going to be drafted. So I think what you're going to see is someone like Hooper gets drafted in a redraft league. He's actually pretty high in the PFN ranks. He's actually ranked as tight end 10 due to projections and things like that.
That's
so
fair. That sounds right.
There's a lot of love on the PFN team for him, and I think that's warranted. That's a due justice there. But at the same time, it's not somebody I want to put a 5th or 6th round pick on, right? He's not steady, and that offense is not steady, and Baker is not steady. There's a whole bunch of things that we're just not sure about. At the same time, his ceiling is pretty high. So he's a great late round flyer to take a chance on if you're looking for some risk on your team. So yeah, I'm kind of avoiding him per se. I don't think that's a bad thing in redraft, but I am looking to buy him in Dynasty. He just signed this monster deal. I don't think Njoku is going to be on that team very long, and I think the longer he works with Baker, the better he's going to get. And again, with Stefanski liking tight ends, I think all of that's going to add, but that means his short-term value may not be great, so his redraft value for me is low, but his dynasty long-term value is much higher. And that's kind of what I wrote up in the article that I put out for PFN, is that I think in redraft, I think he's got some potential. I think he could be there, but you got to be careful when you draft him. And then in dynasty, he's a buy low, terrific buy low candidate.
Right. That's definitely fair, guys. And if you can, check out that article if you want to know a little bit more about him. I would rather have what we just talked about, Evan Ingram 8.5, Hunter Henry 8.8. Because in the 6th round, I just feel like in redraft leagues, the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds are so meaty with so many wide receivers. Like this year, I can pretty much tell you how your home league is going to go. First 3 picks for almost everybody is going to be quarterback. Running back. Everybody's going to running back. There is so many wide receivers in the middle rounds that have a chance to jump up to wide receiver 1 status. It's just it's wealthy for the wide receivers. When it gets to past a certain tier, and that's what we're going to talk about today, overvalued, undervalued running backs, when it gets icky after a certain tier where you're just like, oh, like I can't, like, not this guy, not this guy.
And it falls off that ledge quick. Yeah, I'm right there with you. There are guys you're like, oh, I'd be okay with him, and then you're like, oh, I guess I'm looking at Boston Scott as my running back too. Woo, right? That's a risky play, right? Because, that happens. Zero RB is not a technique I would recommend this year. Not at all.
No. And if I am doing zero RB, it would be modified, where I would still be trying to get, like if I do zero RB, I ideally want to walk away with, like, a James White and, like, a Jordan Howard or Matt Breida or something like that. Somebody who's in the middle that people are, like, waffling on. But that's never the way that I go. I always want to anchor my team and redraft with one stud running back, like a guy that I know I can set my watch to.
And that's exactly. I just wrote a mock draft recap article actually where I was at the 7 spot and I took Dalvin Cook, who fell to me at 7, and it was I call it was a modified, like a 1 running back technique, right? Where instead of 0, I take 1 running back in that first round, and then I just hit everything else, and then I don't go back to running back until round 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there, depending on how the draft goes. And then you can get guys in those later rounds that are still great values, like Tariq Cohen, who's even in non-PPR, Tariq Cohen, James White, those guys are still going to get touchdowns. They're still going to get yards. So I think they're going really, horribly underrated in a way. So we'll get into some of that later.
That's one of my guys. Spoiler alert, that's one of my guys. He's undervalued, and we'll talk about it for all those reasons. But yeah, like exactly. Even Tariq Cohen, James White, Tevin Coleman, all these guys are there. And Tevin Coleman, I'm a 49er fan, so I know Tevin Coleman is the starter. Like, he's the first person who touches the ball. It's not Raheem Mostert. Like, if you're taking Raheem Mostert, it's because you're hoping that he banks on the 15 touchdowns that he had in like 3 weeks. That's going to be a little bit hard to replicate, I feel like, So, again, if you're doing modified zero RB, those are the targets that you should have in those middle rounds. So, let's move on to Jets camp. So, Rashad Perriman and Denzel Mims were not practicing today. This is a bump, clearly, for Jamison Crowder, who everybody in the PPR world pretty much loves at this point. We suspect him to have 3,000 targets. as he did in the short time that he was there with Sam Darnold. But there's a lot of talk about somebody that I've always been big on, and I've still been waiting for the breakout, but apparently they're saying it's this year, and that's Chris Herndon. Again, tight ends later on that can pop. Chris Herndon might go undrafted in your league. Probably will go undrafted in your league. What you should do is, and this is how I got Darren Waller last year in a Yahoo league. Yahoo's one of the different platforms that allows you to drop somebody who's already played, so you can pick somebody up. So I looked at my roster after week 1, and they had the last Monday night game last year, right? The 10 o'clock game. I looked, and I was like, all right, this guy didn't do anything. I dropped him for Waller to see what happened. Guess what happened? I got a tight end 1 because Hunter Henry hurt himself in the first week. So, like, it's not bad to always be on the lookout and try to pick up those guys as a speculative ad just to make sure that you have them and you don't have to run to the waiver wire to go get them.
No, I'm right there with you, and especially if you're on a Yahoo or some other platform that allows for that, that's a great piece of advice that I don't think you hear enough is know your platform, right? Know what the rules are for your team. Did your players lock at the first game or individual start times? Can you make trades during the games? I know there are some leagues where they shut it all down and you can't. I've seen some where there are guys trading players for those 4 o'clock Eastern games, right?
Wow.
So it's always good knowing your rules, knowing your settings, and knowing your platform of what it will and won't allow. I mean, that's a great piece of advice too. But yeah, I mean, you're looking at Herndon. I think is criminally underrated because he burned so many people last year.
Yeah.
He was one of those guys that everybody was kind of hyping up, and now he's post-hype, so he's a post-hype sleeper, right? So he's somebody that I think a lot of people are sleeping on, and I don't blame them. But at the same time, I'm fine with it because I'm with you. I can grab him in, if not the last round, on the waivers in week 1. Something else that I always recommend that people do, even in leagues when you have to start a defense or a kicker, is don't draft one unless your league specifically says to draft one, right? Let's just, who cares? We can stream that all season anyway. It's not going to matter. 1 or 2 points isn't going to make a break. And that's when you can take a guy like Herndon in week 16, round 16, and then see what he does in week 1. And then say, all right, well, even before week 1, of course, you can hear the drum beat. You can see if injuries happen. You give yourself an out. And then right before the game, you drop him for the Eagles defense and you start a lineup and you're good to go. So Absolutely. That's one of those players I love doing that with because you never know what is going to happen in there.
Absolutely. Beautiful piece of advice right there. So, yeah, I feel the same way, too. I was banging the Herndon drum last year because of the way that he finished the season 2 years ago with Sam Darnold. They showed a rapport. Adam Gase. See, here's what gets me excited about him. Last year when Ryan Griffin stepped in for him, Ryan Griffin ran a lot of routes. And Chris Herndon is a better player than Ryan Griffin. I think we can agree on that, right?
Hands down. Yeah, hands down.
As long as Gase gives him those routes and lets him, and he's allowed to. And now we're talking about Denzel Mims and Brashard Perryman maybe missing. Now you're talking about him building a rapport with him to a point where he gets a huge target share, just like Jamison Crowder, because Herndon actually operates in a different part of the field than Jamison Crowder, even though he's a tight end. Everything with Crowder is in the middle of the field, out. Nothing down the field, not gonna threaten you up top. Chris Herndon can do it all. Like, he really can run well. He can make some spectacular catches. The talent's there, but that the talent isn't always enough. But yes, I agree 100%. If you don't have to, kickers, it doesn't matter. Draft him, let him sit there, and if you hear out of week 1 feature role, then you got a decision to make on who you should cut. There's always gonna be someone else that you're either just gonna be like whatever, or they go on IR, whatever. So.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, or you can even have a guy like Duke Johnson or somebody that's kind of, or like a Carlos Hyde, right? Some of those running backs that you pick up for depth that you realize, man, it's just not going to be somebody, right? I just don't think we're going to get there. So I'm going to drop Hyde and I'm going to hold on to Herndon, right? Those are the kind of decisions you wait until that. Exactly. You wait to that last minute.
Right. There's no upside with Hyde. There's all upside with Hyde.
Exactly.
So what does this mean for Chris Hogan? I'm just kidding. Let's move on.
It means he might play a game this year? That's about it.
They're talking him up again, and I'm like, you know what? I did this dance the one year that I thought that Edelman wasn't there. Like, I had Hogan on all my teams, and I got burned.
Same. I remember trading him actually right in one league. I traded him right before Edelman came back. I want to say like at the highest possible value, and it was for a 2018 third or whatever. I mean, it was for like a third round pick, and I felt happy about it. I'm like, great, I'll take it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And I don't look at that as a great trade, but man,
So look, let's get into your team. So AJ Green has been practicing. That has to give people a little bit of pause because that's, last year we saw him in the boot and he didn't wind up making it. I had AJ Green on a lot of my teams sitting in IR hoping that he was going to come save my team. Fortunately, it didn't happen last year. So when you hear that camp starts and he's starting to go through this again, people are going to get scared. His ADP is going to fall more now. It's going to fall even more. But Zach Taylor says that Green and Higgins are going to be back to practice this week. Good news for sure. But this is, the thing is if you're drafting this week and then you start to get the reports that Green is back, then his ADP swells. But if everybody is like, oh, I'm scared of him, I don't want him, like him, T.Y. Hilton, all those guys, I don't want them, they're hurt, they're going to slide into a spot where they're going to be staring you in the face and you're going to say, I have to take him here at this point.
Well, so the thing that blows my mind with AJ Green, last year, he was injured. He got injured the first week of camp. It's my team. I remember a lot of this. He was injured, early August, and there was 6 to 8 week time frame, and everybody's like, well, maybe he'll make it back week 1, right? So there's a whole bunch of confusion, and nobody really knew. And he was going in ADP around the 8th or 9th round, right? He was still getting drafted because everybody's like, he's a wide receiver 1. He's a stud. He's just over 30, but he's going to come back and he's going to have to ball out because it's a contract year and all this.
Sure.
So the logic was that he was hurt, but he was still valuable. He's going lower than that this year, even though he's healthy. I don't understand that. I really don't. I think that this year, especially with the way that offense has taken a turn, with Burrow now under center, he's going to need a veteran presence to go to. And that locker room is going to boost him up. AJ Green wants to play. He has been a fan of this team for a long time. He's wants to stay here. This is his time to shine and be like, here I am. I'm going to make it. I think, too, the thing that blows my mind with that in even bigger ways is that everybody is all hyped up on Higgins with that rookie kind of mindset. And I think T. Higgins is the guy, and you start to see his ADP rise a little. And Boyd obviously is rising, too. But Green just gets criminally ignored. I don't understand it. I do not get it. Because I think he's one of those players you can get in the 10th round, and even in your home league, because everybody's fading him. Not mine. He'll probably go in the 3rd round of my Cincinnati home league.
Your Cincinnati home league, right.
Yeah, and in the 10th round of a normal home league, and you can get a guy that is a potential wide receiver 1. There are very few options at that round, at that level of value. I did not add him to my list because I saw him on your camp thing, and I said, well, I don't need to double that up. I think Green is one of those guys that if you can get him as a bench spot, and just in all honesty, what I love doing with guys like that is put him in your bench, let him blow up week 1, and trade him.
Sell him. Yep.
You can get more for him after a good showing. His ADP is going to shoot through the roof whenever that happens. Or if your league isn't very active, and some are not, you've got a great bench player that can start for you, right? There's nothing worse than having too many options, right? So I'm fine with that. No. So yeah, either way, there's nothing but upside with him at that value. Nothing but upside.
Especially if your first 2 rounds are, let's say, wide receivers, right? Like, let's say, you're at the turn and you end up with, like, let's say Devontae Adams and Chris Godwin. Now you're talking about adding AJ Green as your 3rd receiver, possible flex every week. In PPR leagues, you have such a positional advantage. You have 2 top 10 guys and a guy who could push his way into the top 12 provided health. And I love to swing on that sort of upside as well, too. And I think everything that you said about the offense taking a step forward, Jonah Williams is going to be back. So you guys are going to have the line looking better. Forgive me for saying this. And if I'm off, please correct me. The defense isn't going to be as very good. You guys are going to find yourselves in a lot of shootouts. And the tempo is going to raise with Zach Taylor. And Joe Burrow just offers more with his legs, with his arm than Andy Dalton did. This offense is going to take a step forward for sure. So that's why I'm trying to get my piece wherever I can. If it's mixing, good.
Well, I love that. I'm right there with you. I think there's a thought that I had actually right around the time when they drafted Burrow. There was some talk about, well, do we cut Andy Dalton or not? Right. And there was some talk about maybe you have Dalton start the season so that Burrow doesn't have to have the team on his back. And I remember thinking myself very passionately as my team, right? I said, Dalton's got to go. You need to throw Burrow in the deep end, and you need to see what he can do, because if it doesn't work, we need to know right away. Right. I'm saying we as a Bengals fan here, right? So what that means to me is Burrow's going to come out balling. If it was Dalton, I might actually fade Green a little more than I am now, because there's a potential that it's the same old blah offense. But with Burrow and Zach Taylor wanting to make a point, I mean, Zach Taylor doesn't have a long contract. He's a new coach. He's not going to have a 10-year contract out of nowhere. He's going to earn it. And I think last year with Dalton, everybody kind of saw the writing on the wall. So I don't blame AJ Green for sitting out either. It's like, why risk? We're 0-6. Why would I come back? Like there's no benefit. Well, no, now it's a whole new season. He's got a chip on his shoulder and it's something to prove. And I really do think that offense, like you said, has got so many talented pieces. Now that you add T. Higgins, you get obviously a healthy everybody back, and the offensive line should be better finally. So I think that you're going to see that. And you're exactly right. The defense isn't great. And that is terrific in fantasy. Because what you end up getting is those games where against the Browns, even where they don't score a lot or don't play a lot of, different offense schemes, you could get a 35-34 kind of game against any of our in-division rivals. And those games happen 6 times a year. So you're looking at a bunch of points, and I'm right there with you. It's nothing but upside.
Yep, yep. I'm trying to get me a piece wherever I can of this offense. So, let's move on to my team then. There was some concern. Brandon Ayuk was tearing it up in camp, man. Like, people are glowing about him. The comparisons to Odell Beckham and a few people like that. That's great to hear. Unfortunately, when you hear hamstring, you get a little nervous, and we all know that Deebo Samuel is dealing with the Liz Frank injury. But Kyle Shanahan said today that he hopes to have both of them back for week one. It was reported later on in the day, Adam Schefter went on NFL Live and said that the team expects Brandon Ayuk to be there week one. I wouldn't count on Deebo, and here's why. One, Deebo's too vital to the success of this team, right? And you have to look at the first 4 games of this schedule for the 49ers. Cardinals, Giants, Jets. Not exactly a place where we need Deebo Samuel to push himself and put himself in harm's way. We probably can run the ball all over those teams and walk out of there 3-0, 2-1. The team that I would be more afraid of out of those 3 clearly is the Cardinals, and I'm super afraid of them because the 49ers are just awful in containing mobile quarterbacks. But Brandon Ayuk is going to be there week one, it looks like. People are drafting him pretty high, and from everything that we're getting out of camp, he's going to be a big part of this offense. Like they didn't move up in the draft to get him. Without this was Kyle Shanahan's favorite receiver of all of them. And when I watched him at ASU, I knew exactly why. He fits perfectly. The slant game, that you run after the catch, and he plays much faster than his 40 speed. Don't let his 40 speed at the combine throw you. He does not play at a 4.5. There's some guys that juice it up, and he's one of them. So I'm interested to hear about where you'll be comfortable in taking Ayuk, and what you're doing with Deebo at this point. Like, is it hands off completely because it's the uncertainty of a Liz Frank injury, or are you going to take his discounted ADP and have him sit there for a little bit for you?
Well, I guess it depends on how you build your team, right? If you've got a lot of risk early on, then I'm not adding these guys later, right? But if you're taking steady Eddie guys in the first 6 rounds and are needing somebody to kind of boost your team, or that you're looking pretty solid for the first few weeks, you've got guys, like a Marlon Mack who's going to start out the season hot. You got guys that are on familiar offenses that don't have a lot of change. You're not drafting rookies that have to acclimate to the NFL. If you've got a bunch of those steady guys that you feel like you can start the season off with, then I love taking somebody like Deebo in the 8th or 9th round and seeing where his ADP drops, because there are people fading him hard, but when he comes back, I think he's going to come back healthy. I don't know why they wouldn't. Right. And there's no reason to risk it, like you said, in those first few games. So I would be shocked if he comes back before week 3. I'm right there with you. But at the same time, that's only helping you in fantasy. And I don't mind stashing him as my first bench option in any league. Just here you go, sit on the bench just like you are for your team, because when you come back, you're going to be a stud.
Right, sit in IR for a little bit, and I can go chase the next lottery ticket.
Yep. Now, Ayuk is a little bit different to me because, again, he is a rookie. It is a soft tissue injury. Those tend to linger. We haven't had a lot of camp and preseason to kind of work out that rust and to kind of make that connection with the offense and things like that. So for me, Ayuk is someone I'm willing to draft in those later rounds, that 13, 14, whatever. It depends on if he's still there. And that's by no means a condemnation of his talent. I'm right there with you. I think his talent is stellar. I just look at it as I'm not always the guy that takes the guy early when it comes to a rookie receiver. Receivers tend to take longer anyway. So even a guy like T. Higgins or Brian Edwards, all these other players we're hearing a lot of boost about, right? Mims, yep, same thing. None of that first tier, like the Lamb, the Judy, those guys are different. Ballers. Those are kind of studs. Yeah, but in that second round of rookie dynasty picks, you're seeing a lot of those players, in my opinion anyway, going in that 10 to 15 range in redraft. And I don't think that's a bad spot for them, but I would fade a little more on Ayuk just because that offense spreads it around a lot. You've still got Kittle, of course, who's going to absorb a ton of targets. They've got 7 different running backs or whatever it is, right, that are all going to be trying to catch the ball out of the backfield.
Well, they cut one today.
Who'd they cut today?
Salvon Ahmed.
Oh man, he was one of my sleepers. I was hoping.
No. Here's the issue: he fumbled twice, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah. All right.
That's what happened to Matt Breida.
Yeah, and that's something that happens a lot with running backs, right? They get a lot of hype, they get a lot of this, and then they can't perform. And fumbling is a huge one. You can't let the ball on the ground. Pass protection is another one, right? Yeah. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up about the 49ers, I was all in on Jalen Hurd this year. That was my guy. I traded for him in a few leagues where I was rebuilding because he got hurt last year and had no value and all this. And I was like, no, I think he's got a potential. And I drafted him in a couple startups, even in like the 20th round in Dynasty. And it's just Oh, crushed my
Um,
soul. So as a Niners fan, what do you think about that? Do you think Hurd's going to come back? Is it over? I
you know
mean,
what? Unfortunately, I think the world of his talent. I think the world of what Kyle wants to do with him in the offense. You know, you can put him anywhere. People seem to forget that he was the starting running back in Tennessee until some Camara
yep.
got screwed up. And I was excited for all of that. You know, all things considered, all we really got from Jalen Hurd was one preseason game where he caught 2 touchdown passes, and we went nuts, right? Unfortunately, he's been hurt at every level. And I don't think it's not fair to call him injury prone, but it is fair to expect that he's probably going to be one of those guys. He's a huge man. Like these huge guys, like it's hard for you to keep your body, you know, fresh the entire time. It was a back injury last year, torn ACL. The kid's going to do everything he can to come back next year. But it's just like this is heartbreaking right now. So they're going to keep
Yeah.
trying him because this is something that Kyle wants, is one of these red zone targets that he can. We don't have a guy, even Kittle. Kittle's not used in the red zone at all. Like
Not much, no.
if he's ever used there, then you're talking about the number 1 tight end probably in fantasy and redraft. You know, it's still Kelsey, even though I know that Kittle's the better player, but he's not utilized that way, and I think that's something that's missing. Even if Jimmy Garoppolo isn't a throw it up and let guys go get it type of quarterback, you still don't have that with the offense. Like Ayuk's still not a super contested catch guy. You know, they drafted Juwan Jennings. Like they have 2 of each, right? Debo and Ayuk are the same thing. Juwan Jennings and Jalen Hurd are sort of the same thing. So he's trying to find it with these guys. He just has to figure out who's going to be healthy enough to do it. So I mean,
Who's going to be the leading receiver for the Niners in Week 1? That's the question I'm dying to know. Like you follow the team better than I do. Who do you think is going to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy for the Niners in Week 1?
well, wide receiver. I mean, pass catcher is Kittle. It's going to be
Of course,
Kittle.
of course.
So it depends on who plays. If it's Debo, it's probably not gonna be Debo. It'll probably be Ayuk. I'm not gonna lie. The first week, it probably will be Ayuk. The problem is that who's gonna flank him on the other side? It may be Kendrick Bourne. Like
Right. That's what I was
thing.
going to say. It could be Bourne. It could be Taylor. It could, and there's a whole bunch of guys that could end up being the guy that gets 3 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown and is the best option. Right. And so that, to me, it just to kind of go back to the main point, that also scares me a little bit about that offense. That's why I'm probably fading them in draft. And I'm totally fine picking guys up off the waivers as the season goes on and we start to see how that team shapes up. But Debo's probably the only receiver there, not pass catcher, because Kittle, of course, I'm taking, but Debo's probably the only receiver I'm really seeing myself take. Right. And I haven't done a whole lot of redrafts recently. I've got 1 or 2 coming up still. And the one that I'm in now, I passed on Debo a couple times and it felt weird, but at the same time, there were other guys that were just better value. Right. And so with that uncertainty, kind of going back to even what we were talking about with the Browns, there is some confusion a little bit on that. And there isn't really a stud receiver there with Debo potentially being injured. So I'm willing to wait and see. That's really all it is. I'm just going to wait and see how Week 1 shows up and then go from there.
For sure. That's good. So and then this last camp blurb, like we could talk all day about camp because all we have are these reports anyway. We don't have anything else to talk about.
I'll take it.
Right. But in Washington, you know, unfortunately with the Darius Guice situation, I'm sorry that we have to talk fantasy because that's not something that is you know pleasant to talk about. But we do have to talk about fantasy because he was going to be relied on for certain people. Antonio Gibson has been taking a fair share of the first team reps. Now, if I was betting Week 1, who's going to be the starter? It's good old Adrian Peterson.
Same here. Yep.
But Antonio Gibson is a guy that in dynasty startups, I just grabbed him in the 8th round of a dynasty startup because I wasn't going to wait around. Like, he wasn't going to make it back to me. Like, I could see it happening. That's the thing. Like, when you draft from those edge positions, it's all about get your guy. Like, you're not going to be able to play the game.
Sure.
You can't play the game.
Sure.
So when I saw him there, I took him, and then the draft board, like the draft chat lit up like, oh my God, that was like, isn't that the best feeling in the world when you draft somebody that a whole bunch of people wanted? Like, that's the best feeling in the world. But
yeah, there's nothing better than sniping your entire everybody. Yeah, I love doing that. Yeah.
That's it. And everybody is kind of on Antonio Gibson at this point. There's been a little bit of Bryce Love hype, but Bryce Love, as we found out in the report today, has been running with the 2s and 3s, and so is J.D. McKissick, right? There's like 15 running backs over there, even with Guice gone. Peyton Barber's still over there on that roster. There's a lot going on over there. But Antonio Gibson is one of those guys, like later in the draft, that he could take this entire job over, man. Like, I don't take lightly that Ron Rivera called him CMC. Like he compared him to CMC because he's not – all right, I get what he means. He's not saying he's CMC. He sees the same sort of skill set. And Ron Rivera's no nonsense. Like, he's not going to – he doesn't do coach speak. Like, I really believe him when he says that. He does that to put confidence in his player, but also I think he really sees that, and that takes a little bit of importance to me. It's great to hear that he's taking first team snaps, and that they're going to creatively use him with motion, probably line him up in other places. So he might be viable if you're desperate, stuck in deeper leagues, or where you're starting a whole bunch of flexes as a week 1 starter. But if I had my choice, I would like to draft him, wait for this whole situation to play out before I unleash him.
Well, I'm right there with you. So, I mean, just for context, I'm in the Scott Fish Bowl that hopefully goes off without a hitch this year, but I got him at 14-11. And I'm like, in the round 14, granted, we're talking, July when this draft happened. But at the same time, my logic was Antonio Gibson is one of those players that if you can get him for the right price, he will be a stud. I don't necessarily feel like drafting him in the 8th, 9th round myself, but I get it, right? I understand the logic. And strangely enough, I'd rather take Adrian Peterson in those rounds just because, in my mind, I think Peterson is a guy that isn't going to get any talk. He isn't going to get any reps because he's Adrian Peterson. He doesn't need the reps. He doesn't need the extra injury, the extra contact. So all we're going to hear is that coach speak propping up the rookie because he's the future. So in Dynasty, Antonio Gibson is obviously a stud and somebody you want to have. And if I only own Antonio Gibson, I only own that one share of Antonio Gibson is in Scott Fish Bowl. Everybody else, every other league, I passed on him. Every other league, I missed on him. However you want to put it in the rookie draft, it just wasn't to me. I would rather, for redraft especially, I would rather have a guy like Adrian Peterson because, again, like we said, from week 1 to 2, you'll know a lot about how that offense is going to flow. I also think that Peterson could, I hate to say it, but could get injured. He's probably a higher risk of injury, right? He's older. He's not necessarily spring chicken anymore. So he's one of those guys I don't mind taking as even like a running back 3 or 4 in one of those, zero running back kind of strategies where he's going virtually under the radar and nobody remembers that he's there. But I still think Peterson is the guy. You're going to see a lot of Gibson, and then you're going to see a lot of Bryce Love too, barring anything crazy. I don't think Barber and McKissick have much left on the tank there. I think they're kind of falling off. But again, that offense is going to be really interesting to see how they come out. I'm right there with you. And I think Camp Talk, we're hearing a lot of positives about all of the guys because there's no reason to say negatives. That's really it.
For sure. And then I think the only thing that really scares me about Adrian Peterson is that he's so game script dependent. Like if they're getting boat raced, it's over. Like he's not going to be on the
Which
field.
Is very possible.
For sure.
Yeah, that team could easily be down 10-0 in 3 seconds. You know what I mean? Like it just, you never know.
You have to hope that Chase Young brings a little bit more to that defense and they're able to plug up some of those holes and things like that. But I try to stay away from guys that they need everything to go right for them to be relevant. Like, there's the stud running backs, no matter what the score is, they're going to be on the field. Adrian Peterson doesn't catch passes out of the backfield. And like you said, it's very possible that this team gets down in almost all their games. And if that's the case, you're going to see Gibson a lot more. So I think week 1 is going to be a very, very good indicator. So like I said, Gibson in redraft later on, you're fine. I took him at 8-9, I believe, in the Dynasty startup, but I just needed to get my hands on him. Like it was the same thing.
In Dynasty, that makes perfect sense. Yep.
Right. DeAndre Swift is going super high in Dynasty. That doesn't mean that he's ready to contribute on week 1, even though you might believe that eventually down the year he will. But that's the way you got to play it. That's the difference. That's what I enjoy about Dynasty startup. It's the beautiful mix of can you put a team together that can win now and set themselves up for the future.
Yep. Every year should be win now. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. I put up a win now team, like where my 3 receivers are Evans, Hilton, and Green. And I sent it to one of my friends, and he's like, well, where are your studs? I'm like, listen, I was like, you have a 1 or 2 year window. I just started a Dynasty startup, I joined a Dynasty startup, and I want to win now. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I have all my picks for next year. So if something happens, whatever,
and you've got plenty of time to win next year. Let's win now, right? The championships doesn't wait. You got to go win it when you can. I'm right there with you.
For sure. So good discussions there. Do you want to get into some overvalued, undervalued wide receivers and running backs?
Sure, I'm ready.
So let's start with overvalued wide receivers. So I sent you my list, and we've chosen the only player that we've gotten on our list, which is good. It's going to open up for more discussion. And I think we should touch on him first. One of my overvalued wide receivers and one of your overvalued wide receivers is Cooper Kupp. Anybody who's listened to this show knows my undying affection for Robert Woods. And again, the philosophical change that we saw at the end of the year with the Rams offense, right? Where Gerald Everett went down, Tyler Higbee went crazy, right? And remember, this all coincides with a soft, tight end schedule of those last 4 games. Now, it's nothing to sneeze at that he had 100 yards in each of those games, but that gives you a little bit more context because I feel like Higbee is like people are just forgetting that Everett's there. And now you have to buy into the idea that they're completely going away from what they were doing before. and not changing the game plan to succeed where those weaknesses are with those other teams. So Cooper Kupp just needs I think that what he's going to depend on this year, and this is what I don't want to depend on, is he's going to be touchdown dependent this year, I think. I think
I
that
agree.
he's all over the red zone. That's where they use him, right? Robert Woods is going to have all the catches in between the 20s, right? And I think that's where the value is going to come in. He's due for some positive touchdown regression. Cooper Kupp is going the other way, I believe, this year, and I don't think that he's going to have anywhere near the numbers that he did last year. For him to be in ADP on Fantasy Pros, 15th wide receiver off the board, is that right?
Well, I had him as wide receiver 10 when I looked, but I don't know if I was looking at standard or PPR. I mean,
Right. I think
he's going too high. Yeah.
In PPR, he's 15. In standard, he's 10 because the touchdown thing we talked about. 15 is too high for me. In that range, I have to pull it up actually. In that range, there's a few guys that I would like there instead of him, and I'm going to pull it up right now. So for wide receiver, right, we said 15. Let's see. My thing's taking forever. All right, 15. So, yeah, he's 15.
You got Thielen, you got Cooper, you got Beckham all right ahead of him,
Calvin
and you got
Ridley,
Brown, Ridley, and Sutton. Yeah.
Give me Ridley. Give me all those guys pretty much at this point over him. Again, we might end up at the end of the year saying that Robert Woods was the wide receiver 1, and that's truly in my heart of hearts what I believe is going to happen.
Well, I'm right there with you. So to kind of piggyback on that, I'm looking at the same thing. I have Kupp probably in that wide receiver 20 range. 20 to 24. He's still a wide receiver 2, but I have Woods at the top end of wide receiver 2. So I've got him flipped. So that's why I had Woods as an undervalued wide receiver, because he's going, I mean, according to this, he's wide receiver 19 and Kupp is 15. Those should be switched, right? I definitely think Bobby Trees is going to have a better year than little Cooper Kupp.
Love it.
Right. So I'm just saying, I think Woods is a guy I'd rather have. Of the two, give me Woods all day. PPR or non doesn't even matter, because I think I'm right there with you too. I think that the touchdown numbers really inflated a little bit of what Kupp got done. Not to say he can't do that again, but touchdowns are the most volatile stat in fantasy. It's impossible to predict them year to year. There is just literally zero correlation on that. The offense has changed too much. The lines changed too much. Every moment in a game matters to get a touchdown, and there's no way to replicate that. So I think if you go on volume, you go on obviously the basic presence on how a team drives. I think you're going to see Woods be better. And to even hit on your Higbee point, I've been saying that for a long time. I actually owned Higbee in one league last year, share of Higbee, I should say. And what I ended up doing at the end of the year, he blew up, right? And it helped me propel me to a title. And I'm not going to lie, that was the reason I won that title, right? Him, and I just got lucky. That's what it always takes a little bit of luck. But then in the off season, he was the first piece I sold, right? I'm like, there's no way that any more hype can get on this guy. And I got rid of him. And I think that's something that I see a lot happening is you got to know when to get in and when to get out. And I think in dynasty terms and thinking of it like a stock market and all of that, we're always looking for values. We're always looking for guys to buy low and sell high and shares of them, right? So I think Higbee is one of those guys this year. I don't know if I really trust him as much as the market does. So to kind of keep on the Rams, I didn't list Higbee as anyone. We're not talking about tight ends, but I do think Higbee is somebody that I am more than happy to have as a tight end too, right? Like a backup tight end or a flex option. Because if he ends up blowing up like everybody says he is, then you've got a great option. But I don't like leaning on him as my first choice. Right. So yeah, I think that offense is going to kind of settle back to where it was 2 years ago. You're going to see Woods be the guy. Kupp is going to be a PPR guy in a way, but I still think he's behind Woods. And then you're going to have Higbee and Everett both kind of fighting for those tight end targets. It's just going to be a mess.
For sure. And that's it. I mean, I don't think anything more needs to be said when it comes to that. So why don't you give me another overvalued wide receiver that you have?
Sure. So this one's tough for me. It's DeAndre Hopkins. So I talked about this when I was on the FF Astronauts podcast, right? When the Fantasy Astronauts with Jetpack Galileo and Mike Risch. And I think it's tough for me to see how he gets the volume in that offense, right? DeAndre Hopkins is fine with any quarterback you put on him and all of this. But when he played for Houston, that's true. But even with Brock, he wasn't as bad. He was still a wide receiver 1. But the catch is he didn't have anybody taking targets from him in Houston. He was the funnel. He was the choke point for that entire offense. Going to a new offense that loves to spread it out and run 4 receivers, I just don't know if his volume is going to be there. And I'm not saying it won't. I'm saying I don't know if it will. And that uncertainty for me causes me to pass on him more often than draft him. So right now he's wide receiver 5, I believe, in standard, and he's going wide receiver 3 in PPR. That to me is too high.
No.
I would much rather have Tyreek Hill, Julio Jones, Chris Godwin, Kenny Galladay. Like, no offense to Hopkins, but those guys are all on offenses where they're staying essentially the same, right? Yeah, Godwin's getting a new quarterback, but essentially it's an upgrade from Jameis to Tom Brady.
Tossing to
Good
the
God.
slot too.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, you've got guys like DJ Moore, who I think is a potential stud in the wings and could be a top 3 wide
I
receiver
love
after
DJ
this.
Moore.
So I'm saying, like, I don't hate DeAndre Hopkins. I just would rather have him at that kind of 10 to 12 back end wide receiver 1 range. So overvalued at the top is really getting nitpicky because it's just feeling and gut. But I still think Hopkins at wide receiver 3 in PPR, that is too rich for me. I will pass. Someone else can have that. And if it blows up, I don't mind. But at least I don't have to worry about the stress being on my team.
For sure. And then to the point that I made earlier, too, about the middle rounds, and there's so many, like Calvin really is going to blow up this year. Calvin really is going to beat Godwin. And I know that I'm not the only person saying that, and I didn't steal it from anybody, but I think we're all locked in step where we feel like here's a guy that's about to take the next step, right?
The writing's on the wall. Yep.
Right, that's what would push me away from somebody like Hopkins, right? I can run and I can get another running back, and then double back and still get someone who has the same sort of upside. The only thing that I would say is that I think the volume is going to be there for him just because Arizona runs 70, 75 plays, right? And then again, their defense isn't good. They're going to be behind, right? And even with Kenyon Drake, they toss the ball a lot, right? So I think he'll be fine. But again, 3 is too much. 3 is way too high. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Calvin really finished third. Like, I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked.
No. And I think that to me, that's looking at it more of that 3 is Hopkins' ceiling. I don't like drafting guys at their ceiling unless you're number 1, right? Christian McCaffrey's ceiling is number 1. Well, yeah, I'm taking him number 1. But to me, Hopkins has a wider range. His floor is lower, and that pushes him down a little bit more because there are other guys that have the same ceiling that for some reason are going in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, like Ridley, for instance, who has the same ceiling. Well, I'd rather take a risk on that later than a risk at the first round. You know what I mean? Like, wide receiver 3 in PPR is essentially first, second turn. You're looking at the back end of the first. That to me is too rich. I'm out.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Hey, Andrew, I didn't want to and we're having a great conversation, but we gotta hurry this along a little bit. We're like maybe 10, 15 more minutes. So I'm gonna try to get through this. Maybe we just do running backs this time. And then, you can always come back on the show. I would love to have you again and we can talk wide receivers and stuff, right? So we may have
Sounds good.
Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
It's my fault. The season is ramping up right now, so I have to jump on a 49ers podcast right after this, and it's a lot. I mean, I'm happy football's back, but it is a lot.
We're all in the same boat, man. Right there. Let's go. What do you got then for undervalued wide receiver? Let's go the other way for a second.
Oh, so we can do undervalued. Yes, my first one. This one is easy, right? We're talking about end of the draft guys, right? And it's just I feel like nobody is mentioning this guy, and they don't understand what he can offer you, and that's Preston Williams. I've been a big believer of Preston Williams. Remember, he slid in the draft because of character issues, but he flashed in the preseason with Josh Rosen, with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, if you think back to last year, Preston Williams was the target leader. And then Devontae Parker went on to lead the team in targets once Preston Williams got injured, right? I suspect another year, all the reports out of camp are glowing, and you can have Preston Williams in one of your last 2 rounds, if you do it the right way. He's screaming value. He's the 53rd wide receiver off the board. That doesn't make any sense. In dynasty leagues, go get him. The smarter guys are going to know to keep him. But in redraft leagues, this guy is screaming value at you at the end of the draft. And I've been gobbling him up everywhere that I can. I just been holding on to him, and I'm waiting because I love the player. I love the situation. They should be throwing the ball a ton. And there is a world where Williams and Parker can both return their value at the right spot. And I think this is the year. And I think that Preston Williams really this year is going to leave his mark on the league, and people are going to really take notice. And then next year is when he'll be drafted appropriately.
I'm right there with you. And I love that pick too. I am one of those people that tends to draft Preston Williams before everybody else. And then I get those reactions of like, already you're reaching now. Like, no, I just want to make sure he's on my team because I think yeah. So again, going back to that same PFN redraft league that we're in right now, I got him at 9.5, and that's a little early for some people. But my logic was,
but you're in a savvy draft.
Well, exactly. It's an expert draft, and a couple of the guys in this draft are Dolphins fans, and I'm drafting right beside one who I know is a big Preston Williams fan. Shout out to Corey on that one. But the catch is, Preston Williams, for me, is a guy who is a perfect flex option. He's someone that you can lock in as a flex role every week. He doesn't need to carry your team, but he can have that boom bust. He can get you 100 yards. He can get you 2 touchdowns in any given week. Now, that's frustrating because his floor could also be 2 catches for 25 yards. That, to me, is a prime flex candidate. I want someone like that in my flex spot who gives me a little bit more risk. I don't like necessarily taking someone with that kind of risk profile in my starting positions, but the more flexes you have, the more risk you can have on your team, the more availability you are to do these reaches in drafts. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Preston Williams is a stud in the making, and I think he's criminally undervalued right now.
For sure. So what's one of your undervalued wide receivers, Andrew?
Sure. So again, looking kind of more at the top, just because I feel like that's where everybody's got an opinion on these guys, and it makes it for more fun conversation. But for me, Allen Robinson is one of those guys that is just always ignored. I don't know why. I guess it's because of Trubisky or Foles. Right now he's going at wide receiver 16 in standard, wide receiver 10 in PPR. I'm okay with 10 in PPR. I get the logic, but 16 in standard is too low. Right. To me, he's easily a top 6, top 10 receiver. And he's one of those guys that you can take as your first receiver in the 4th round. Right. He's one of those guys that falls in ADP. And in some cases, you can see him in your home leagues go even later. So an ADP of wide receiver 10 in PPR is pretty accurate. And I don't mind that. But in standard leagues, he's, for whatever reason, getting ignored. And I don't get it.
Right. I actually have been doing that same thing, right? So the reason that I joined so many dynasty startups and I do them is because I kind of want to just practice, right? I want to see how my team, like I take different chances in every league. I don't stick to everything. I want to see what my team looks like at the end, right? I've been ending up with Allen Robinson and Calvin Ridley. I'm not certain that you can pair two, especially at their price. Allen Robinson is as safe as it gets. And I think that everybody's scared because of Trubisky. But what are you afraid of? Last year, he was a wide receiver 1 with Trubisky. And if Nick Foles comes in and plays even a smidge better than that, then you already know that he's going to be fine. Look, he's one of the elite route runners, elite separators, elite contested catch guys, right? Like he's a joy to watch run routes. And I think that because he's over there in Chicago, people don't understand that. And imagine how we would talk about Allen Robinson if he didn't start his career with Blake Bortles and then move right into Mitchell Trubisky. Like,
yeah, poor guy. Oh my God, that's just brutal.
This is a guy succeeding all with everything stacked against him,
in spite of it.
Right.
Yep.
So that's why I like him there. Like, and if you're pairing him with someone else and he's your wide receiver too, good God. Like that's your perfect balance of floor and upside. That's Allen Robinson, and I could not agree with you anymore on that. I really, I'm getting him anywhere that I can.
There are some mock drafts that I've been doing recently for PFN. We do like a mock draft Monday where every Monday we try to do a couple mock drafts and kind of get people ready. But this season's been a little weird just because there's so much question marks about everything. But I've been taking him as like the 5th or 6th receiver off the board in mock drafts just to see, even if I take him where I believe he should go. Because again, ADP is a tool. It's not meant to be that's where he should go.
Right.
It's more like that's where people take him. So you can use that and then say, all right, well, he's got an ADP of 16, so I can wait a little bit and get him maybe in the 3rd or 4th instead of reaching for him in the 2nd. So sometimes in those mock drafts, I'll reach for him early and take him in the 5th or 6th receiver because he deserves that. And I like my team, but I also know I could wait around and get a better running back in the 2nd and then get Robinson in the 3rd. So for me, that's kind of the useful part of ADP and for mock drafting entirely is see where the market goes, see what you do, and see how your teams look. Like you were saying, using it as practice. Allen Robinson is one of those guys I have no problem at all getting because he is so silent. No one talks about him. He's going to be a stud for sure.
For sure. I like that a lot too. So I'll go with another undervalued wide receiver. Michael Gallup. I understand, guys, the hesitance, right? There's CeeDee Lamb there, Amari Cooper, he was one of my overvalued, and here's why. Michael Gallup he sees the number 2 corner a lot, right? And he's better than almost every number 2 corner over there, right? So, you've got a new offense with Mike McCarthy where they're going to throw the ball more. And they lead the world in vacated targets. Jason Witten's not there anymore. Randall Cobb left. And you'd be surprised at how many targets Randall Cobb got last year, right? This is why we all like Blake Jarwin, right? There's a world where CD, Blake Jarwin, Gallup, and Cooper can all perform for your team, and just depending on what you need. Like Blake Jarwin, I think is going to get the short end of the stick because everything that I read about CeeDee Lamb, oh my goodness, man, watching him run routes, like he was my number 1 wide receiver off the board, and he fell to a team that didn't need him but took him because they were just like, we could possibly move off of Amari Cooper and keep Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb and be fine and probably not miss a step. So the reason that I feel that Amari Cooper is overvalued, right? At 13th wide receiver off the board, if I'm not mistaken, right? 13th?
Yep, 13.
13th wide receiver off the board. My issue with Amari Cooper is that there are far too many games where he goes silent. Like cornerbacks that are tough and they press him and they start to knock him off his routes, he kind of just goes away and he's ghost. I don't need guys like that on my team, right? Tyreek Hill will do that, but it's not because someone's pressing him. It's just because they went somewhere else with the – but he can win you weeks. He'll boom for you and win those weeks. Amari Cooper can do that, but I'm not ready to have him there at the 13th, right? Michael Gallup, on the other hand, with all these vacated targets, he's going to take another step. He was incredible last year, and nobody talked about it. And everybody seems to just be off of him completely to where his ADP is depressed to, let me see, what is it? He's the
32.
32nd wide receiver off the board? What? Let me just, for argument's sake, right? Let's look around who's there with him, right? Julian Edelman, Will Fuller. I want him over Marquise Brown. I want him over Jarvis Landry. The reason that I want him over those guys, I want him over Devontae Parker also. The reason that I want him over those guys is because, again, you're not drafting him at your ceiling. He's not. There's no way that he's going to end up the 32nd wide receiver at the end of the year. He has top 15 potential, top 20 for sure. Now, if you're talking about that sort of upside in a pass-friendly offense with Mike McCarthy now, and the guy is really good. Like, I just watched the tape and I watched him run routes. He's incredible, man. Michael Gallup is sliding in drafts, and if he's your wide receiver 3 or 4, that's incredible. That is incredible.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. Both of those guys, same kind of for the Rams. I'd much rather have Gallup at his price than Cooper at his, right? Amari Cooper has a long history of zeros. I can't tell you how many times I've lost a game by 3 points, and I'm looking at Amari zero going, just
One
something.
catch?
You
Right.
All you need, yeah. So I'm right there with you. And just to kind of reference this, PFN just released Philip Caldwell's consistency score, and this is kind of a new way of looking at week-to-week scoring in fantasy. A lot of people like yearly rankings this time of year. But week-to-week consistency, like we were just talking about, that's what wins you weeks. Amari Cooper last year ranked 22nd in consistency, and that was a terrific year for him.
For sure.
And it was still 22nd in this consistency score model. So to me, what that says is he's a great flex option. To go back to what I was saying before, I would love to have Amari Cooper as my flex. That's not where you're drafting him. You're drafting him as your wide receiver 2 in almost every situation, or even a wide receiver 1.
Right.
So the catch is, if I'm going to get a guy that volatile, that inconsistent at that price, that's too risky for me. I'd much rather get other running backs, tight ends, whoever, and then, I guess fall in luck with Gallup later on, right? And get that guy his consistency was 31 last season, which obviously sounds bad. It's right where his ADP is, but it's better than his ADP.
Right.
He's more consistent than the price you're paying. So at that point, you're getting a good value for him. And I do think I'm with you. I think his ceiling is just as high as Cooper on a week-to-week basis. So why not? Let's play the upside game here. Let's get Gallup.
For sure. Do you want to give me one more undervalued, and I'll give you my last one?
Sure, yeah. So the last one that I want to mention, and I brought up Robert Woods earlier, so I don't need to bring him up, but the other one I definitely want to bring up, which I get it, but at the same time I'm confused by it, is Juju Smith-Schuster. I get that he had a bad year last year. Ben missed the whole season. They were playing with some quarterbacks that I don't even know if they're in the league anymore, right? They're just horrible quarterbacks.
Yeah, real bad.
They shouldn't be. But the point I'm getting at is he's going at wide receiver 11 right now. Now, to me, I get why he's wide receiver 11. I get it. There's some uncertainty and all of this. Ben is saying he's coming back healthier than ever. The surgery needed to happen. He said he's had pain for 12 years, right?
12 years,
now
right?
you've seen Deontay Johnson take a step up. James Washington take a step up. You got James Conner in the backfield, who should be healthy at least to start the season. I am saying that Juju Smith-Schuster is one of those guys who is a top 10 receiver. And if he's going at 11, you're nitpicking on that. But in my opinion, the ceiling for Juju is wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Right. You're looking at another, and I'd rather have him at wide receiver 11 in that ADP and getting that value than Hopkins, who I brought up before. Right. Sure. So Juju is going to be on a high-powered offense, with a great line, with a great running game, with a great defense. They're going to have to move the ball, obviously, to win the games anyway, even if it's low scoring. I think Juju is the guy, and I think, again, he's like Allen Robinson. He's just going ignored right now.
Right, and I think that, we have to remember the last time that we saw Juju on the field with Ben, right? Ben was largely terrible in the year that he led the league in passing. I mean, it just happened that he threw 600 times and he threw for 5,000 yards, right? I'm with you on that one, though. Like, if you're going to start your draft with a receiver and then you're going to go receiver, imagine pairing him with, like, Devontae Adams.
Julio. Yeah, Julio. Yeah, exactly.
Mike Evans, that is a positional advantage because, like you said, Juju's ceiling is much higher, and he's not being drafted at that. So, like, yes, I completely agree. And there is a world where Juju Smith-Schuster can completely outscore DeAndre Hopkins. There is that world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm seeing him go in like 5th and 6th rounds even in some PPR drafts
That's
with low
crazy.
QB. It's like
That's
I
crazy.
don't get that. That's to me, I'd rather have him over Cooper Kupp.
Yeah,
Right.
for
I'd
sure.
rather have him over Robert Woods, who we were talking about before,
For
who I
sure.
think is great value. But again, I think he's going behind some of these guys because they're getting hype and he's not.
Right.
So he's not getting talked about. People are ignoring and forgetting about him. I think he's someone you could easily grab in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round and be very happy with at the end of the year.
Right. Well, recency bias is a hell of a thing, man. Like, just people just remember what they saw last year. But like you said, Mason Rudolph's not an NFL quarterback. Neither is Duck Hodges. I think there was the game that Mason Rudolph played against the 49ers. He threw 3 passes past the line of scrimmage. One of them was a 40-yard bomb to Deontay Johnson. The other ones were like right in front of the line of scrimmage, where literally 3 guys came up and tackled. So to get Ben back is already a bump, right? Now, if Ben is anywhere near where he was 2 years ago, again, he doesn't have to be good at football to be good for fantasy. And I think that I want people to get that out of their head because Ben did look largely awful his last year. But he threw for 5,000 yards. He threw the ball 600 times. So that all you need is volume, right? It doesn't matter if it's efficient volume. It just matters if it's volume, right? So
yeah, and he's going to have volume. Yeah,
for sure. And if Juju kicks back inside to the slot, then it's over. Then leave Deontay Johnson and James Washington over there, and now Juju's really going to dominate.
That's what I was just going to say. Like, I think the real reason you saw Juju struggle is because he was asked to be Antonio Brown, right? And when he played alongside Antonio Brown and was not getting that outside coverage, he did really well. When they moved him to the outside and kind of put the focus on him, the defense put the focus on him, it just didn't quite work. Well, now that we've seen Deontay Johnson kind of come into his own, James Washington gets another year, I think those guys, like you just said, those guys are going to get those outside coverage, and you're going to start to see those mismatches in the middle where Juju can shine. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he's a stellar pick in the 5th round if you can get him there.
For sure. And Deontay Johnson has shown that he can separate. That's really what it is. That's why everybody's on Deontay Johnson. Nobody's on Deontay Johnson because he performed last year. It's because if you watch the film, he's open by a wide margin, and he just happened to be playing with 2 terrible quarterbacks. So I think that's why everybody's in on Deontay Johnson as well too, and that makes a lot of sense. If they're even able to get to 550 pass attempts, both of those guys will be fine for you. Fine. Agreed.
Yep.
All right. My last undervalued wide receiver is Sterling Shepard. 47th. So look, I know why everybody's off of Sterling Shepard, right? Injuries, a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, right? Shepard, Golden Tate, Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton, who everybody likes, and let's not forget that Saquon Barkley's there as well too, right? I just feel like Sterling Shepard's being a little bit disrespected right now because when he was on the field last year with Daniel Jones, he led the team in targets. And that will continue, I believe. And that's the thing. Now, when we're talking about the 47th wide receiver off the board, it is very feasible that you already have 3 receivers, maybe 4 at this point, and he could be your 5th. Imagine getting a wide receiver 1 at the 47th off the board. You're not going to get – you might be banking that person takes it, there, but he's guaranteed as long as he's on the field to be that guy. Now, are you willing to take the chance with him because of his injuries? I am if he's my 4th or 5th wide receiver because the ceiling is too high. He could end top 25 easily, and he'll have those blow-up games where the Giants, they're bad on defense. They're going to be trying to throw themselves back into games. Now, the only concern that I have with many Giants skill position players is this death schedule that they have to start the year with. You're starting with Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Philly, and then I forget what the first four are. For you people that are going to go get Daniel Jones at the end of your draft, make sure you have another quarterback the first few weeks because the people who are relying on him to be their one quarterback, they're going to drop him after week 3 when he doesn't do anything, worth it, for them.
Yeah, and the schedule's bad at the end of the year too, I think, right? It's just, it's a, man, that is it. They've got a brutal schedule. I'm right there with you.
They do, and that's the only thing that could really scare you. But again, pass attempt, volume, behind in games. So Sterling Shepard could garbage time his way into some points for you. I still love him at that price at 47th, and I've been grabbing him in almost every draft that I have just to feel safe, and just to add a little bit of depth where I don't want to be stuck starting somebody in a bye week out of necessity, hoping they do something. I'd rather start somebody that I know if he's on the field playing, he'll get 6 to 7 targets, and he'll have to do something with that.
No, he's a perfect bye week felon. He's somebody that gets you better than a goose egg, right? That's the whole point.
Sure.
I think what's strange is you're seeing what I'm looking at here on Fantasy Pros ADP. With PPR, you got Slayton 46, Shepard 47, Tate 52. So
No.
all three of them are kind of right there together. And in my mind, I understand the upside of Slayton. I'm okay with taking him first. I'm okay with that. But I'm agreeing with you in the sense that Shepard is being slept on too. He is the wide receiver one in that offense. He is probably the most veteran guy on that offense. Tate may be older, but I'm pretty sure Shepard's been there longer. And you're going to see games where Slayton is going to have 0 and then he's going to have 23, right? Shepard is the kind of guy that, especially in PPR, he'll get you 10 points almost every week. That's exactly somebody, if you've got a lot of risk at the top, to go back to what I was talking about before, you got to balance your team out. If you've got a lot of risky guys, you've taken a lot of flyers, you've reached on guys, Shepard is the perfect guy to let fall to you in the 10th round and just to be a security blanket and say, all right, well, now I've at least got 10 points from him. I don't have to worry too much. It's not like my floor is going to be that low. I will say that I think his floor as a positional player can't get much lower than that. So at that point, you're almost guaranteed to get your value out of him. At wide receiver 47, I don't see how he performs worse than that.
No.
So, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think there's nothing but upside in that pick. Now, it doesn't have maybe the volatility upside that you get from Slayton,
Right.
but like a week-to-week score. But at the same time, Shepard is a prime candidate for someone in that range that you can just sort of, fit on your bench and then end up starting him by week 3 because he's just that good.
For sure. And then the last point, and then we can end on this. The last point about Slayton, and I think that everybody is in love with the talent and what they saw, but you have to remember when he really popped off on those weeks, it was when Tate, Shepard, Ingram, all those guys were down. It's hard for me to see where Slayton fits in this pecking order because I have a feeling that he's going to be behind all of the pass catchers and Saquon. That's my issue. Now, if you're taking Darius Slayton, I think that's baked into his ADP and his risk, that you understand that you're taking him because you want to play him in the right matchup and you want that boom week. Like when they go and they play Washington, right? You suspect that game should go back and forth. That's probably when you're going to be really comfortable starting Darius Slayton and hoping for a big week. Again, it's all about how you prepare through your draft. Are you risk averse? Are you on with risk and things like that? And if you're taking risky picks or guys that are winning the weeks early, like you said, early in your draft, then make sure that you get the safer guys. If you're doing it safe, then make sure you go and get your upside guys. And I think me and you, all we did was agree this entire pod, like pretty much.
I know. Really a boring podcast. Not a lot of arguing, right?
For sure. But Andrew, we'd love to have you back, man. So we could finish this up. Just a little bit of time constraint this time. It's really my fault more than anything. I should have just not booked myself to do this, but I want to say thank you for coming on. Your information was great. Tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter and where your stuff is so they can follow you on here.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I'm pretty active on Twitter. I'm at Andrew Hall FF. I also help manage the PFN Dynasty handle is at PFN Dynasty. Obviously, we have Dynasty in our name. That's our focus. We're more of a draft. NFL Pro Football Network does a lot of draft work. So that's why we're focusing on Dynasty because there's a lot of rookies and Devy and things like that in Dynasty that you don't really see as much in redraft. But yeah, so profootballnetwork.com. I got an article, like I said, two a week during the season. We're going to be cranking out, trying to get as much content as we can just to try to help our readers get a little bit of an edge up. I know as the season goes on, we're going to start do a lot of the redraft focus, but we are going to kick back into Dynasty in January and start to look at those Dynasty values and trades and all that kind of stuff that everybody likes to see. Because the way I look at it too is Dynasty is redraft during the season. Yep. Right, you really can only do so much. To kind of hit on a point we talked about earlier too, with dynasty leagues, you don't see a lot of weekly waivers, but you still need start-sit decisions. You still need value plays. You still need sleepers. Like all these things still matter. You still see a lot of buy low, sell high, that kind of stuff. So all of that sort of overlaps during the season, and you're going to see a lot of that from PFN as we get through this.
That's awesome. PFN, I think that's my guys, Matt Barr and Javi Vega. They have the Fourth and Goal podcast. Those are my guys.
Exactly right.
So,
that's right. Yeah. They're awesome. Yeah, no, they're great to interact with, and they're terrific 49ers fans. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably the best 49ers podcast out there right now, and I'm on one, so I have to. I'm still saying that.
Be careful.
That's how much respect I have for them. That's how much I respect.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. All right, I'll let them know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll text Javi right now and let him know, I talked about you on my pod. So me and him have that sort of relationship too, and me and Matt talk a lot too. So those are very interactive guys, and a lot of you guys from PFN seem to be the same way too. It's a very reputable company. So I want you guys to know that Andrew does a lot of good work, man. He's a great follow on Twitter. So make sure you guys do that. And Andrew, like I said, we'd love to have you back, man, and continue to discuss fantasy. I think we're just gonna try to stand off a little bit more? Like maybe me and you should just like, you know what? I might even take another side just for argument's sake, just to give people both
We'll
sides.
figure it out. We'll get this together next time. Yeah,
For sure,
it'll be
for
great.
sure. So yeah, I mean, we'll be in contact. You know, maybe I'll have you back next week. I have one more show to do tomorrow with somebody else. I'm gonna try to up to 2 a week. So if you'd love to come back on and talk, we'd love to have you.
Be happy to. Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Awesome, Andrew. I appreciate you, man, and thank you for stopping on. And everybody who has been listening, you know, we're close to 8,000 plays. Last episode, I didn't even know was our 80th show. I had no idea. So, you know, appreciative to everybody out there who has been listening, liking, subscribing, passing it on to their friends. Just know that, you know, I'm trying my best I can to deliver as much content because we are getting the draft season. This is a beautiful time right now. So, you know, follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Bros Pod, on Instagram at Fantasy Bros Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Jason Aponte 2103. So for Andrew and Jay, we're out of here.